I never believed the night could feel so alive, so heavy, until that evening. It wasn't the kind of darkness that simply fell when the sun went down. No, this darkness carried weight, like something that pressed against the windows, seeped through the walls, and crept inside your chest until your own heartbeat felt like it didn't belong to you anymore. I can still hear it. That pounding. That uneven rhythm. And the silence that came with it, a silence that wasn't really silence at all. It was like the world itself had stepped back, holding its breath, waiting for something unspeakable to happen. I was alone that night, or at least, I thought I was. The streets outside had emptied long before midnight, the kind of emptiness that makes you feel like you've missed the last bus out of the world. My apartment was small, one of those buildings where every floorboard creaks like it's trying to warn you of something. The air was stale, heavy with the smell of rain-soaked concrete. I tried to distract myself, scrolling through my phone, turning the TV on, switching it off again. Nothing worked. My chest felt tight, restless, like I was being watched. Like someone's eyes were already inside the room with me. The first sound was so subtle, I almost convinced myself I imagined it. A faint click, somewhere near the hallway, like a door handle easing back into place. My breath caught. I froze, every muscle in my body stiff, ears straining to catch the next sound. Nothing. Just the hum of the fridge in the kitchen. Still, the sensation clung to me, sharper than ever. I wasn't alone. You ever get that feeling when the air in a room suddenly changes temperature? When the atmosphere itself shifts as though someone has just entered without opening a door? That's what it felt like. My skin prickled, every nerve on edge. I told myself it was nothing, just paranoia, but the mind has a way of betraying you. It whispers things in the back of your skull, little suggestions that coil and grow until you can't ignore them anymore. I tried to laugh it off, muttering under my breath. Get a grip. There's nothing there. But the words felt wrong the second I said them, like I wasn't convincing myself but someone else who might have been listening. And then it happened again. Another sound. This one closer. A soft shuffle, like bare feet brushing against the wooden floor just outside my bedroom. I didn't move. Not at first. My throat dried up, hands trembling slightly as I gripped the edge of my blanket. My brain screamed at me to get up, to check, to do something. But my body wouldn't obey. It was as if my survival instinct had split in two. One part urging me to run, the other chaining me down, forcing me to stay perfectly still. And then came the whisper. It wasn't loud. It wasn't even clear. Just a faint, dragging sound, like a voice caught between a breath and a growl. I couldn't make out the words. Maybe it wasn't even words at all. But I knew, deep in my bones, that it was human. My mouth went dry. My chest tightened as if invisible fingers were pressing against my lungs. I turned my head, ever so slightly, toward the door. The gap between the bottom of the door and the floor seemed darker than usual, as though the hallway beyond had swallowed every trace of light. That's when I saw it. A shadow moving, slow and deliberate, breaking the strip of blackness beneath the door. Someone was standing there. I don't remember making the decision, but I found myself standing, my bare feet sinking into the cold floorboards. I moved toward the door, my pulse hammering against my skull. My hand hovered over the doorknob, but I didn't touch it. I couldn't. The metal seemed to radiate a coldness that was almost alive, like if I gripped it, something would grip me back from the other side. Then, silence. The shadow didn't move. The air was still. Seconds stretched into minutes, each one suffocating. I stepped back, inch by inch, until the creak of the floor betrayed me. That's when the doorknob turned. Slow. Deliberate. Like whoever was outside wasn't in a hurry. Like they wanted me to hear it. Like they wanted me to know. The metal clicked softly, the sound slicing through the silence like a knife through flesh. My blood ran cold. I stumbled back, heart clawing at my ribcage, but the door didn't open. It just stayed there, trembling ever so slightly, the knob twisted halfway, waiting. Whoever was on the other side wasn't trying to barge in. They were playing with me. Testing me. I couldn't take it anymore. My voice cracked as I shouted. "Who's there?" No answer. Not a sound. I thought maybe it was some sick prank, maybe I'd open the door and find nobody there, just an empty hallway. My trembling hand reached out, finally gripping the knob, and with one sharp breath, I pulled it open. The hallway stretched out before me, dimly lit by the flickering bulb overhead. Empty. Silent. No one. But the smell, that's what hit me first. Metallic, sharp, like rust mixed with sweat. It was the kind of smell that sticks to the back of your throat, the kind that makes your stomach twist. And then I noticed it. Faint, wet footprints trailing along the wooden floor, glistening faintly under the weak light. Bare feet. Leading away from my door, and stopping halfway down the hall. The footprints didn't continue. They just ended. As though the person who left them had vanished into the air. My mind raced. Maybe I was dreaming. Maybe this was some kind of sleep paralysis. But the sting in my lungs, the taste of copper on my tongue, the weight in my chest, it all told me this was real. I closed the door, locked it, double-locked it, pressing my back against the wood as though my own weight could keep the nightmare at bay. My pulse wouldn't settle. My body buzzed with adrenaline, every nerve screaming that the danger hadn't passed. That it was still here. Because deep down, I knew, once something like that comes inside, you can never really shut it out again. And that's when the whisper returned. This time, it wasn't outside the door. It was right behind me. I could feel it before I even turned around. A weight, a presence, a shadow so close it pressed against my back like invisible fingers. My breath caught in my throat. Every instinct screamed at me to move, to run, but the room felt smaller, tighter, like it had shrunk just to trap me. Slowly, carefully, I turned. My eyes widened, heart hammering so loudly I could feel it in my fingertips. Standing there was someone. Not fully visible, but tall, lean, the kind of presence that fills a space without moving. The dim light didn't reveal much. Just the outline, the way he leaned slightly forward, almost studying me, smiling faintly, but that smile, it wasn't friendly. It was predatory. I wanted to speak, to demand answers, but my voice failed. My throat tightened, my tongue heavy, as if reality itself had decided to hold its breath along with me. The silence stretched, suffocating, broken only by my erratic heartbeat. Each thump echoed in my ears, reminding me, I was trapped, alone, with someone whose mind was not tethered to sanity. And then he spoke. Not loudly, just enough to send chills crawling down my spine. "You shouldn't have left the light on," he murmured. His voice was calm, precise, and every word seemed to cut into the air, carving anxiety into my chest. I tried to step back, to create distance, but the room betrayed me. The walls felt closer, the shadows deeper, and my own legs felt like lead. My mind raced, thinking of every escape, every possible move, but nothing seemed possible. He didn't move toward me. Instead, he circled slowly, deliberately, his gaze sharp, studying. Every movement, no matter how small, felt choreographed to torment me, to break me down without touching me yet. My skin prickled with unease, every nerve alive with terror. "Do you feel it?" he asked softly. "The way the darkness listens. The way it waits?" I swallowed hard, trying to answer, but no words came. My chest felt ready to burst, my pulse a frantic drum, and yet I couldn't take my eyes off him. Something about the way he held himself, like a conductor of a silent orchestra, made me realize that this wasn't just a man. This was a predator, meticulously aware of fear and how to manipulate it. Then, without warning, he leaned closer. The air between us thickened, every breath he exhaled tasting like iron. His face remained in shadow, features blurred, but his presence, his presence was undeniable. The room seemed to constrict even further. My back hit the wall. And in that moment, I saw his eyes, sharp, unrelenting and terrifyingly calm. The sort of eyes that don't blink, that don't waver, that stare straight into the part of you you try to hide even from yourself. "You like control, don't you?" he whispered. "You like to think you're safe, in your world, in your little rules. I shook my head, panic spiraling. My mind was a storm, fight or flight screaming at me, but my body frozen. Shoo, he said, soft, coaxing, almost gentle. Don't fight. It only makes it worse when you resist. I realized then that the terror wasn't just him standing there. It was the knowledge that he knew exactly how fear worked, exactly how to dismantle someone with mere presence and whispers. My hands shook uncontrollably. My eyes darted around, seeking any escape, any clue, any way out of this nightmare. Suddenly, a sound. My phone, lying on the bed, vibrated with a low hum. I lunged for it, desperate for any lifeline, but he moved with impossible speed, pressing a finger to my chest, holding me back, as if gravity itself bent in obedience to him. I told you, don't resist, he murmured. His lips curled in that same faint, cruel smile. Every word echoed, lingering in the air, making my chest tighten even further. And then the world seemed to tilt. The shadows in the corners began to creep, stretching unnaturally, feeding off my panic, as if they were alive and responding to him. The floorboards groaned under invisible weight. Every second dragged, a slow, torturous eternity, each heartbeat pounding louder than the last. He circled again, this time closer, just a whisper away. I could feel the heat of his body without it even touching mine. The smell, something metallic, mixed with an almost faint sweetness, filled my nostrils, making me gag. You're thinking about escape, he said, voice low, intimate. It's cute. So human. But you forget. Fear is a leash. And I'm holding it. My mind screamed. I pictured running, throwing myself at the door, smashing windows, screaming for help, but none of it felt real anymore. Every possible escape seemed pre-planned, anticipated, a trap of its own. It was like being caught in a web, and he was the spider. He paused, watching me, as if savoring my desperation. Then he leaned even closer. His breath brushed my ear. The thing about fear, he whispered, is that it doesn't end when the danger leaves. It follows you. Always. And now, you'll never forget tonight. I could feel his hand brush against mine, or maybe it hadn't even touched me, but it sent shivers down my spine, reverberating through every nerve. The room felt impossibly still after that, yet every instinct screamed that this stillness was a prelude to something worse. I realized then that this night wasn't about survival. It was about awareness. About understanding what it means to be completely at the mercy of another mind, someone whose reality and morality are unhinged, whose obsessions are not bound by human limits. And just when I thought I couldn't endure another second, he was gone. Just like that. No footsteps, no door closing, no shadow, no trace, only the residual chill and the metallic taste of fear lingering in the air. I collapsed on the bed, trembling, my mind spinning with 1,000 questions, none of which had answers. The apartment felt hollow, haunted not by ghosts but by the realization that monsters aren't always visible. Sometimes, they simply exist in the human mind, in obsessions that go unchecked, in presences that can invade without warning. Even now, years later, I remember that night vividly. The way the air moved, the smell, the whisper, the shadows. The way fear can be both a predator and a prisoner. And sometimes, just sometimes, when the wind rustles outside my window, I feel that presence again. Watching, waiting, patient. Because a psychopath never really leaves. Not fully. And the lesson I learned that night, painfully, irrevocably, is that some encounters with evil aren't just moments. They're lifelong scars etched into your memory, moments you relive with every beat of your own terrified heart. It started innocuously enough. I had just moved into a small, dimly lit apartment building at the edge of the city, a place no one seemed to visit often. The kind of building where the hallway lights flicker and the air always carries a faint smell of mildew and damp carpet. I was tired from the move, dragging boxes that seemed heavier than they should be, when I first noticed him. He wasn't in the hall at first. Just a door slightly ajar on the 3rd floor. A shadow moved inside. That's all I saw at first. A shadow. But then, as I passed, I caught a glimpse of him through the gap. Tall, thin, perfectly still, eyes seemingly fixed on something only he could see. I froze, trying to convince myself it was just a trick of the light, a trick of exhaustion, but the feeling of being watched crawled up my spine. Days passed, and the unease grew. Small things. A doorknob that seemed used more than it should. A faint laugh echoing down the hallway when no one was there. The constant sound of scraping, soft at first, then deliberate, coming from the walls themselves. Every night, I'd hear his footsteps outside my door, slow, measured, patient. And every night, they stopped right outside my room. I would lie in bed, holding my breath, listening to him move away, but never far. I tried to meet him. I knocked, smiled politely when I saw him briefly, but he never responded. Eyes always fixed forward, lips pressed tight, as if he didn't even register me. But the building, it seemed to shift with him. Objects moved slightly when I wasn't looking. I would leave my keys on the table, only to find them in another room, always somewhere I couldn't immediately reach. One night, exhaustion overwhelmed me. I fell asleep on the couch, lights dim, hallway quiet. Then, I woke. The room was darker than it should be. Shadows seemed thicker, heavier. The faint smell of iron filled the air. My heart raced. I could hear it, almost whispering, the soft scraping sound again. He was in the apartment. Not in the hallway, not outside, inside. Standing silently, just beyond the edge of my vision. I couldn't move, couldn't scream. The air pressed down on me, thick, heavy, as if every molecule conspired to hold me still. And then he spoke. Not loudly. Just a murmur, barely above a breath. You shouldn't sleep so soundly when I'm awake. The voice was calm, precise, deliberate. Not angry. Not emotional. Just calculated. Every word a scalpel carving terror into my chest. I couldn't tell if he moved closer or if the room itself had shifted to bring him nearer. I tried to sit up, tried to run, but my body betrayed me. It felt like I was sinking into the couch, as if some invisible force held me down. Panic clawed at my chest, threatening to crush me. The shadows seemed to stretch, reaching, brushing against me with unseen fingers. He circled, slowly, deliberately. Every movement measured, precise. Watching. Listening. I could feel his gaze on my back, on my hands, on every part of me that quivered with fear. Do you know why I live here? He asked softly, almost conversational. Because I listen. I watch. I understand what people fear, what they can't say aloud. I couldn't answer. I couldn't even think clearly. My thoughts were a chaotic storm. Every instinct screamed escape, but I was trapped in some nightmare that didn't obey reality. And then I saw it, my own reflection in the darkened window. But something was wrong. Not my reflection, something behind it. A shape. Tall, thin. Watching. Waiting. I blinked. It was gone. I don't remember much after that night. Only fragments, doors locking themselves, whispers in the walls, shadows that seemed alive. Every night after, I would hear him moving silently, closer, further, never predictable. I realized then, he wasn't just a neighbor. He was a presence. A predator that didn't need to attack to terrify. He fed on my awareness, on my fear, on the fact that I could never truly be alone. Even now, years later, I can't forget. Every creak in the floor, every shadow that flinches at the corner of my eye, every whisper in the dark, reminds me of that silent tenant. He was always there, watching, patient. And I learned that sometimes, the most terrifying monsters aren't violent. They are unseen, always observing, always knowing, and utterly in control. The nights grew longer. Shadows bled into corners I once considered safe. I started noticing subtle patterns, the way he would always be in the hallway, just out of direct sight, yet somehow I could feel his gaze tracking me. The building itself felt alive, responsive, aware. The walls whispered secrets I couldn't comprehend. The air had weight, and every breath seemed to carry a silent warning. One night, exhaustion overwhelmed me. I had barely eaten, barely slept, my mind unraveling at the edges. I fell into bed, hoping for escape through unconsciousness. But sleep did not come. Instead, I was aware of him before I even opened my eyes. He stood at the foot of my bed, a silhouette so thin and elongated it seemed almost unreal. His movements were slow, deliberate, almost hypnotic. I tried to speak, to demand why he was here, but no sound escaped my lips. Panic surged, clawing its way through my chest. His presence filled the room, pressing against me from every side. The walls themselves seemed to constrict. My heart pounded, each beat echoing in my ears like a hammer striking metal. Then he whispered, soft and intimate, yet terrifying in its precision. "You see, fear, it's the language I speak. The only language I need." I tried to move. I tried to flee. But my body betrayed me, paralyzed by a force I could neither name nor understand. Every instinct screamed escape, yet every movement was denied. The shadow behind my bed stretched, elongating, warping in ways that defied the natural laws. He was everywhere, yet nowhere. And then I realized, it wasn't just him. The apartment itself had become a vessel for his control. Doors that I knew opened a certain way now resisted my touch. The hallway outside my room seemed to twist and bend, lengths stretching beyond comprehension. I was trapped in a maze, orchestrated by his mind. I could feel his fascination, the way he analyzed my fear, my thoughts, my smallest micro-expressions. Each bead of sweat, each shallow breath, each blink, catalogued and dissected in silence. Suddenly, a sound, subtle, almost inaudible, yet distinct. The faint scrape of nails on the wall, moving closer, encircling me. I couldn't tell if it was real or a manifestation of my unraveling sanity. The air grew colder. My vision tunneled. And in that darkness, I caught a glimpse of his face. Sharp, angular, with a smile that didn't reach his eyes, a predator grinning at prey's helplessness. "You're learning," he said softly. "You're beginning to understand. You cannot escape me. Not in thought, not in sleep, not in life." Time blurred. Seconds became hours, or maybe minutes. My mind screamed for clarity, for reason, for logic. But reason had no place here. Logic had been devoured by fear. And in that devoured silence, I felt him step closer, into the very core of my awareness. The final moment came not with violence, but with realization. I was not alone. I had never been alone. My own apartment, my sanctuary, had been his domain all along. Every shadow, every creak, every whispered wind through the vents, extensions of him, extensions of his obsession. I was merely an instrument, a witness, a participant in his silent symphony of terror. I do not know how I survived that night. Perhaps I woke, perhaps it was a hallucination, perhaps he simply allowed me to breathe. But the knowledge stayed. Some predators do not need to act physically to dominate. Their power lies in the mind, in perception, in the slow, inexorable unraveling of reality itself. Even now, I feel the walls listening, the shadows whispering, the air pressing with intent. And I know, deep down, that he has not left. He cannot leave. He exists in the pattern, in the fear, in the very rhythm of my heartbeat. The silent tenant remains, watching, waiting, and inescapable, a living nightmare embedded in the fabric of the mundane. It began on an ordinary night, quiet enough that the silence itself felt almost invasive. I had finished my late work, the streets outside empty, illuminated only by the pale glow of street lamps that flickered occasionally, as if uncertain about their own existence. The world outside seemed peaceful, but inside, I felt a tension I could not shake, a subtle, creeping unease. I locked my door, double-checked the windows, yet my instincts screamed that something was wrong. The air was thick, heavier than usual, carrying a faint metallic tang that made the back of my throat dry. It wasn't fear, at least not yet. It was anticipation, the sensation that the mundane had been breached, that an invisible I was observing every movement, every breath. I settled onto the couch with a cup of tea, trying to convince myself that it was all in my head. Then came the first sound, a soft, deliberate creak from the hallway. Not the kind of accidental creak that old houses produce, but a controlled, rhythmic noise, like someone testing the limits of the floorboards. My pulse quickened. I listened. Another creak. Closer this time. I froze. My rational mind scrambled for explanations. The house settling, a cat, a neighbor. But every instinct told me, this was neither coincidence nor harmless. Someone, was here. And they were patient. Watching. Waiting. A sudden draft brushed my neck. I whipped around. Nothing. Just the shadows of my own furniture stretching grotesquely in the dim light. Yet the sense of being observed intensified, like a weight pressing directly on my chest. I wanted to scream, to run, but the roots of terror had already taken hold. Then, the softest whisper. My name. Not spoken, not called, just my name, exhaled into the darkness. I could not locate its origin. The voice was calm, almost intimate, yet cold, alien. My heart slammed against my ribs, and sweat prickled along my spine. The rational part of my mind rebelled, demanding logic. But the fear that laced every nerve left no room for reason. I crept to the hallway, each step measured, silent, as if the slightest misstep would reveal me. Shadows pooled at the edges of the walls, twisting unnaturally, reaching toward me like ink seeping across parchment. Then I saw it. A figure, barely discernible, crouched at the far end. Too thin, too tall, with elongated limbs that bent at angles no human should. Its head tilted, studying me like a predator evaluating prey. I wanted to run, but my legs betrayed me, rooted to the floor. The figure stepped forward, deliberate, quiet, the floorboard beneath it refusing to betray its movement. I could feel the cold, invasive presence, the quiet obsession in its gaze. Every instinct screamed for me to escape, yet the fear was almost hypnotic, pulling me into the spiral of its control. I reached the living room door, hoping to barricade myself, but the lock would not turn. My own hands, shaking, refused to obey. Panic welled up like a storm, threatening to drown me. The figure paused, and for a heartbeat, it seemed almost human. Almost. Then it smiled. A slow, knowing curve of lips that chilled me deeper than any shadow could. You shouldn't be here. Not alone, it murmured, its voice low, intimate, almost playful. But the message carried a weight, an understanding of the fear that coursed through me, a knowledge of my every hesitation. It had been watching, waiting, orchestrating. Every sound I had ignored, every shadow I had dismissed, it had been part of the pattern. I backed away, stumbling, desperate. My mind raced. Every exit seemed blocked, every instinct countered. The room itself seemed to bend, walls elongating, doors twisting. The figure moved with unnatural grace, its eyes never leaving me, analyzing, cataloging, controlling. And then came the whisper again, closer now, in my ear, just a breath away. You can run, but you cannot hide. Not from me. Not from this night. Not from what I have planned. The fear was absolute, suffocating. Time dilated. Seconds stretched into eternities. My apartment, my sanctuary, had become a stage. I was both actor and victim in a horror meticulously choreographed by a presence I could neither name nor fight. The shadows grew thicker, darker, almost liquid in their motion. I realized that escape was an illusion. And in that realization, the terror crystallized. I was utterly, irrevocably trapped. The midnight intruder was no mere figure. It was a force, a psychological predator that fed on anticipation, dread, and helplessness. It existed not just in space, but in perception, in thought, in the thin line between reality and nightmare. The air thickened, pressing down, almost suffocating, as the figure moved closer, silent, predatory. I tried to retreat, but the shadows seemed to ripple, curling around my feet, binding me to the room. Every rational thought I had was shredded by the presence before me. Its face, almost human, yet grotesque in subtle ways, Eyes too wide, smile too slow, movements that defied natural physics. I stumbled backward, colliding with the table. The sound echoed, but it did not matter. The figure was already there, a breath away, observing, calculating. My heart thundered like a drum in my chest, each beat pounding terror into my veins. I could feel the cold aura radiating from it, invading every corner of my mind, whispering doubts, twisting reality. You feel it, don't you? It hissed softly, almost tenderly, yet every word carried menace. The fear, the knowledge that you are powerless, that you are mine tonight. I tried to scream, but no sound emerged. My voice was stolen by the oppressive presence, leaving only ragged, desperate breaths. Panic surged, paralyzing, yet some part of me, a flicker of defiance, forced me to move. I bolted for the door. But the hallway stretched impossibly, lengthening like a corridor from a nightmare, every exit vanishing into darkness. It laughed then, a low, guttural sound that seemed to crawl along the walls and seep into my bones. The sound was almost familiar, yet utterly alien, echoing in ways that made my mind fracture. I stumbled, fell, and in that moment, the figure lunged with impossible speed. Its hand, long, skeletal, impossibly strong, grazed my shoulder. The touch was ice and fire all at once, sending shivers that burned. I scrambled to the nearest window, desperate for escape, smashing it open. The cold night air rushed in, a brief taste of freedom. But the figure did not stop. It moved outside as if it had always belonged there, merging with shadows, emerging from darkness, a predator whose domain was not just the room, but the night itself. It spoke again, almost softly, taunting. You cannot run. Not from me. Not from what you are about to see. Not from yourself. My legs gave out. I collapsed into the yard, trembling, barely conscious. The street lamps flickered. The silence pressed down again, but it was different now, heavier, knowing. I dared a glance back at the apartment. Shadows shifted unnaturally. Something was moving inside, unbound by walls or rules. And then, for a moment, the figure's face appeared at the window. Calm, almost smiling, eyes burning with an intelligence that chilled my soul. I realized then the unspeakable truth. It had never needed to trap me physically. The terror it invoked was enough. It existed in thought, in fear, in anticipation. And I was already ensnared. The night stretched endlessly. Every sound, every shadow, every flicker of light became a potential predator. I felt the grip of reality loosening, the world tilting into nightmare. And in the deepest part of my mind, I knew, with a clarity that left no room for denial, the midnight intruder would follow, not bound by distance, time, or logic. It would linger in every fear, every hesitation, every heartbeat I could not control. As dawn broke, I was left trembling, barely coherent, staring at the empty street. The intruder was gone. Yet everywhere. In every corner of the room, in every creak of the floorboards, in every shadow stretching across the walls, it remained. A predator unseen, unstoppable, and unforgettable. That night changed everything. My perception of safety shattered. I could never ignore a creak, a whisper, or a shadow again. I had encountered a force that fed on the very essence of fear, a presence that had no shape but all power. And I knew it would return, as certain as the night follows the day.